Okay, so if you want an inventory that looks something like this is again just like a little test, I guess. So the textures aren't updated, but this is how it would look. Um, yeah, this is the right video for you, I guess. Okay, let's go over how to create it. So all you're gonna do is also wait, just before I start, I'm showing you like an already added feature in my game. So make sure you're not just copying everything you see. Only copy what I tell you to copy. So first thing first is we're gonna add a panel, and you can do Control A, type panel, and make sure you set the anchors, or you could just do full rect if you click this button and then hit full rect. Under that, we're gonna add a VBox container and then a grid container. Okay, so after that, we're going to change the columns to 4, and make sure you set the minimum size to whatever the VBox container size is, because the grid container is a child of a container, so that way you can't edit the size manually. You have to edit the custom minimum size. And then next, we're going to add a script to inventory. And I know it's a little overwhelming, but we're going to create this function first. These two, actually. And all this is going to do is it's going to manage the visibility. So when you press a certain keybind, this function will be called. We'll set the visibility to whatever it's not equal to. So if it's true, it'll be set to false. If it's false, it'll be set to true. And if visible is true, we're going to change our mouse mode input to visible. If your mouse mode is always visible, this is not a problem for you, so you don't need to include that. And then we're going to pause the tree, which means we'll basically pause everything else but the inventory. So if you're playing like a game where there's like people fighting you, if you open the inventory, those people fighting you will freeze. This is like not a required feature, but if you want, you can include that. And if visible is not true, we're gonna unfreeze the tree. And also make sure you go down to process in the inspector and set mode equal to always, so that we're not freezing the inventory too. And then we're going to go to project settings, input map. You're going to add a action. Call it whatever you'd like. I call mine open inventory. And then you're going to hit the plus right next to the event, and then hit whatever keybind you want it to be set to. And then after that's done, we're going to create a function called input, an inbuilt function, and we're going to see if open inventory is pressed, and if it is just pressed, we're going to call the function on visibility switched. Okay, so the next step is we're going to add our own custom resources. And if you don't know what resources are, what's a good example? Okay, let's look at this. So whatever's inputted into the texture, it gives you a list of resources that you can use to be put into this texture property, right? So these are resources. We can also take a look at all the resources. Okay, it's deciding to be annoying. Okay, well, I'll show you this way. I just need to find. Okay, so resource. It includes all of these. You can't see half of them. I don't know why, but yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. Anyways, we're gonna create a new script in our file system. So right click anywhere on your file system, specifically the folder you'd like the script to be a part of. Click new script. Change inherits node to resource. And then you can call it like item resource, whatever you want. Okay, and you can ignore this, but everything else, make sure you have that. And export values will allow us to modify the resources, so we can have an infinite amount of resources without adding individual scripts to it. Pretty handy. And we're gonna set a class name to item resource. It doesn't really matter. This variable will be for the item name, of course. This one is for how much items are stored, so the quantity of how much total of this certain item you have. And then this will control the texture. So if you have textures for your items, you can use this. For me, I only have like 2 textures in this game right now, so they're defaulted to the normal Godot icon. Honestly, I just recommend you set this equal to the Godot icon because like sometimes you forget to add a texture and it gets quite frustrating. Anyways, that's our item resource. So if you want, you can right click new and then hit resource, type in item. If you double click on that, we can rename it to whatever you want. So let's do bread. Where'd it go? Okay, so if you look to the right, we can edit these properties and the resource will save it itself. So by default, all the items should be set to 0 and the texture can be changed from here. I don't have a texture for this, so I'm just going to leave it as the default. And we're also going to create another resource called inventory. So we're going to do the same thing, inherits resource. If you forget to do the inherit resource part, you can change it, extends node to resource. And then the class name will be inventory resource, or you can just do inventory. We can create an export variable for the inventory. And this will just store all the items the player has. You don't have to include this if you don't want to. Anyways, that's all of the script stuff for now, and we're just going to right click, add a resource, create a new inventory. This is my inventory right here. You can add some of the items you want into here. You don't have to, we can add it later too. But anyways, let's go back to the inventory. So the next step is to create a new scene. It's not this one, it's item rect. So the scene consists of a root node of a panel, and then a texture rect and a label as its child. So the texture rect will of course be in control of changing the texture, and the amount label will be set to control or to display the quantity of the certain item you have. So I created a class. You don't really need to if you don't want. We're gonna create an export variable called item resource, and we're gonna set it to a data type of item resource. And then if you want to just left click on your other two child nodes and then hit control and then release in the script, it'll automatically create a variable for you. Okay, so then we're going to do update rect, and we're gonna do texture rect.texture equals this stuff. So we're basically just changing the texture to whatever the new texture is. So ideally when we do call this update rect, we're gonna change the item resource first and then call this update rect. The amount label is also gonna change. So if you want like a X and then the quantity after, or you can just do like quantity instead of the X, whatever you want. And then we're going to set the tooltip text to the item name. That way, if the player doesn't know what they're looking at, they can hover over the item and they can figure out the name. We also have a function called onStackFull, and has a boolean as a parameter, and basically the status is set to either true or false. If the stack is full, it's set to true. If it's false, it's not full. So if status is equal to true, we're going to set our amount label equal to a color of red. If it's not, we're going to set it to the default white. I believe it's white. Yeah, white or black. Again, if you don't want the max stack, you can just delete this. Then we're gonna go back to the inventory. Make sure you save your scene too. And another thing is we want to change the size to like whatever. So all your textures that you import will have to be the same size, or they should, because otherwise your game might look a little weird. But for me, I set all of my item rects to 128 by 128, and you want to click set to current ratio to adjust the anchors, which are these green things, and you want to do the same for the texture rect and amount label. I don't know why this is so big, but basically these anchors allow the player to rescale their window size, or if they have a different size monitor, the scales of the GUI won't be affected. So they'll remain the same scale, just smaller size. If we don't have the anchors, they'll be stretched in like a real weird shape. Don't recommend that. Anyways, we're going to go back to our inventory, and again, this is all you should have. So in the grid container, you might want to set your H and V separation. I set it to double of the item rect size. So 256, and if you didn't know, you could do arithmetic operations inside here. So yeah, but I'm fine with 256. Anyways, we're gonna go back into here, and we're gonna create an export variable called var inventory resource, and it's gonna be set to the data type of inventory resource. Then you can select your inventories you created, or if you didn't create one, you can just do new inventory resource. And then we're gonna also create a variable called item rect scene equals preload, and we're gonna basically preload the item rect scene we just created. So we're also gonna create an onReady variable for the grid container. Again, control left click release. You don't need these two variables. And we're going to go down to function add item, skip function ready for now. Basically, function add item, as you can probably tell, adds the item. The way this system works is that, let's say, you complete a task or a quest, and the quest will reward the player with an item. We will have to create an item resource or clone a item resource that's already been created, set the quantity to how much the player is receiving, and then call player.inventory.addItem, and then pass through the item resource you just cloned or created. So in this function, we're going to create another function called hasItem. But basically, this variable will check if the item rect is already created. So let's say you already have 3 sticks in your inventory, and you just completed a quest, and now you're about to add another stick to the player's inventory. Since the item rect is already created for the sticks, we're gonna change the item rect's quantity to match the added sticks to the current amount of sticks. If we have no sticks to begin with, then we're gonna create an item rect. So hasItem will take in the resource that's passing through addItem. We're going to create a variable called existing equals false, and this variable will, I guess, track if the already duplicated item rect. So if we do have an already made item rect, this variable will store that item rect, so we don't have to go through a for loop every time we want to, if we want to do stuff in addItem. Basically, just makes your game more performance, better in performance. In this function, we're gonna go through all the children in grid container, because that's where all the resources item rects will be instanced to. And if the item rects have the same name as the item rect or the item resource that has just been passed through, then existing equals true and rect equals C. So that would be the already created item rect. And then we're going to break the for loop so we don't waste time and performance on going through something we already have. And then we're going to return an array of existing variable and the duplicate already existing rect. And if there is none, then it'll remain null. So after we call hasItem, response will be equal to a boolean and either null or a node called item rect. So if response, basically this means if there is already a created item rect, we're gonna add, or we're gonna check if our max stack can handle. If our stack is less than 999, which we can do, actually we can change this to max stack, inventory resource max stack. And if it is, we're gonna call our onStack full function, which we created, and we're gonna return because we don't want to add the items. If it's not full, we're gonna add the amount of items that have been decided by the game, and we're gonna update the rects because the quantity label has to be updated to reflect the new quantity. And if it isn't true, so if there is no existing item rect, we're gonna create a new one with the scene we preloaded, and we're gonna call a grid container, and we're gonna add a child of the new scene we just created. And we're gonna set the item resource equal to the item resource that has just been passed through, because again, this is a brand new item rect. And then we're gonna update the rect to reflect the item name, tooltip, and quantity. So now if we want to subtract the item, the process will be exactly the same as adding an item. So if there is already an existing item rect, we're gonna subtract, or sorry, we're gonna we're checking if the stack is already full, because if it is full and now we subtract, we're gonna change the status. So we're gonna make the color of the quantity text equal to white because it's not full anymore. Then we're gonna do response. So we're gonna get the existing item rect, and we're just gonna subtract the item amount. And then we have to do response one dot update rect to reflect the item quantity. And all this is it's basically saying something isn't right. We're trying to subtract from a non-existing item. So let's say like you're crafting, and for some reason your code says that the player has a stick even though it doesn't. Then it would push this error. And we're also going to do, so after we subtract the item amount, if response 1, so now we're going to check if it's below 0. So let's say we lost all our sticks, we're going to delete the item rect. So if is less than or equal to 0, we're just going to do response 1 dot free, and that just deletes the item rect. Did I do something wrong? I don't know. Oh, I indented. Okay, so that works. And going back up before we forget, the function ready. So if we already have items in our inventory, we're gonna have to loop through all of the existing items in our inventory and add them to our inventory because otherwise they won't be added. And if you want the inventory to save and stuff, all you would do is before the player leaves, or maybe when they add items or subtract, you would just add the item resource to inventory resource as long as it doesn't exist. So yeah, that's pretty much the basics. Like a pretty basic inventory system. Trying to think if hopefully I didn't forget anything. Yeah, so that should be it. Yeah, let's test it out. So my keybind is tab. So I'm going to click tab. I have my already created inventory and it pops in here. We can see the item quantity and the tooltip, and the texture is set to default to the Godot guys. Now we're just going to go quickly over how to add stuff to your inventory. So I'm just going to create a new input called add bread. You don't have to do this, I'm just showing you an example of how to add or subtract items. We'll do slash. So I want to do this in, actually we can do it in the inventory. Also, forgot to mention, you want to add a canvas layer and then instance the inventory under it as a child and set it invisible by default. So that way it's always there and we can always access the inventory. Also, I'd recommend you create a singleton. So if you go to auto loads and you click on, you add a singleton. I have a player manager, and basically all that does is in the world on function ready, we're setting player manager.player equal to the actual player. That way any node can access or can call our player or get our player wherever it is, because it's already has access to it. So I'd recommend doing that because it's a lot easier. But for this scenario, we're just going to go to player and we're going to actually, we're just going to add it an inventory because we already have an input event. Action pressed. And we're going to do, I already forgot what we set it to. Add bread. So now all we would do is do add item. If it was from some different part other than inventory, we would do player.inventory.add item, and that's because my player variable or player has a reference to inventory, so it makes it really easy. So you don't have to do .get node. It's just really convenient. And then we're gonna have to insert a item resource. So I'm gonna duplicate the bread. So we're gonna do var bread resource equals so we're just gonna load the bread. We're gonna duplicate it, because we want this one to remain. So let's say if we want to create another bread from another place, a different time, doesn't interfere, since if we didn't duplicate it, the bread would be messed up basically. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah. And then bread resource dot quantity or item amount equals 1. And yeah, let me just make sure that's the right variable or property. Item bread. Alright. Sorry, I forgot to do this. I'm gonna call this bread equals bread. And that's all we're gonna do. We're just gonna press in bread. So let's take a look. So as you can see, nothing, no bread. Left clicked, still no bread. Oh wait, it's because I left clicked. What's the keybind slash? Yep, and there's the bread, and let's slash a couple more times. And the bread keeps on adding. So let's change this to subtract item. Subtract item. And now all we're going to do is change this. Let's say we want to remove 1, we would just do -1. I believe. No, you just keep it to 1, sorry. So to start off with, we're at 50. Oh, okay, that's my fault. I forgot to do item resource. So we're at 50. And I clicked it 3 times, as you can see down here. And now we're at 47. So let's just spam it a bunch and let's see what happens once we reach 50. So yeah, now we're getting errors, as you can see down here. We also see that the item rect is deleted, which is also good. So yeah, that's all for this tutorial. If you guys want to see more features, or if you're interested in this game, then leave a comment down below. I will link my Discord too if you guys have any questions. And if you want to add or see more tutorials to add more inventory features, then let me know. And thanks for watching.